Thank you so much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Yes, let's do business before we celebrate, or before the beginning of that big celebration. We start from the global space. Oil prices were a little changed on Wednesday after falling the previous day as a dip in the United States crude stockpiles and expectations of supply disruptions from that sanction from the United States on Russia tankers lent support amid forecasts for lower global fuel demand. Take a look at the numbers this morning. 2 cents added to the price of Brent, bringing it up to $79.94. Done better than this week, though, at 0.2%, while for WTI, 0.15%. $77.62 a barrel. At the bottom of this, of course, is because of that new set of sanctions from the United States to Russia. But prices slipped on Tuesday after that U.S. Energy Information Administration predicted that oil will be under pressure over the next 2 years as supply should outpace demand. However, the market found support from a drop in crude stockpiles in the United States, which is the world's biggest oil consumer. This is reported by the American Petroleum Institute and was released late on Tuesday. And then we saw that the Naira yesterday kicked off on a bullish note, driving NAFEX lower, losing 4 Naira 27 kobo. That's for NAFEX. That's equal to 0.27%. At a close at 1,553 Naira 57 kobo. However, there was improved liquidity towards the close, supported by CBN's intervention, and that saw, of course, the official market, the CBN market, up 0.06%. In between that, we have NFEM. NFEM lost 0.5% and closed at 1,547 Naira 67 kobo. We're still staying with the Central Bank of Nigeria, where it sanctioned deposit money banks at 150 million Naira each for failing to provide cash through ATMs during the yield-side season. The move aimed at ensuring smooth cash availability follows repeated warnings from the CBN, and banks affected include Fidelity Bank, First Bank, Keystone, Union Bank, and others. The fines were issued after spot checks revealed non-compliance with the CBN's cash distribution guidelines. Acting Director of Corporate Communication at the CBN, Mrs. Hakama Sidi Ali, emphasizes that maintaining cash flow is crucial for public trust and economic stability. The CBN says it will continue monitoring cash handling at bank branches and POS operators, collaborating with security agencies to crack down on cash hoarding and violations, including enforcing daily withdrawal limits for POS operators. Now, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, and the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, they've signed a memorandum of understanding to safeguard Nigerians from telecom exploitation, albeit in the face of their asking for tariff hike. The agreement focuses on improving consumer protection as well as fostering competition. FCC's boss, Tunji Bello, says that the partnership aligns with President Bola Tinubu's vision of regulatory collaboration to boost market efficiency and consumer welfare. He adds that the MOU will streamline processes benefiting both operators and consumers. The NCC's Vice Chairman, Aminu Maida, describes the collaboration as a milestone for the telecom sector, ensuring transparency and fair practices. He's asking stakeholders to embrace the initiative and its commitment to consumer-focused reforms. Now let's dive right into our very first conversation for this morning, and it has to do with Pipeline Infrastructure Nigeria Limited. They're talking about sustaining security. I mean, we know that the Nigerian economy is built on crude, and pipeline vandalism, oil theft, these are two major enemies to our production. Now, Pipeline Infrastructure Nigeria Limited is one of on the front line of national asset protection companies in Nigeria. They've been saddled with the huge responsibility of protecting Trans-Niger pipeline that cuts across rivers Abia, Imo, and Bayelsa. So let's talk about what Pipeline is doing. That's Pipeline Infrastructure Nigeria Limited. What they are doing with this, with the secretary, you just saw him on the screen, Secretary General of Niger Delta Intelligence Team, Mr. Nse Udo. Mr. Udo, good morning and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning to you. It's a pleasure being here.
So it's no longer news that pipeline vandalism is a major problem for us here in the country. But we know that your company, or the company you represent this morning, has been working to curb this. We had a conversation on this late last year. Tell us what's new that you're doing.
I am not from Pipeline Infrastructure. I don't speak for them. I don't hold brief for them. I'm from the Niger Delta Intelligential Team, and the invite to me indicates that I will be speaking to the issues relating surveillance in the Niger Delta. So if you ask me direct question, what is the pipeline infrastructure doing, I may not be able to respond in that direction clearly.
Okay, so but can you tell us if you think Nigeria is on the right track to win the war against pipeline vandalism?
Yes. I can say categorically that in the last few months and about a year now, there seems to be a major watershed in the approach and strategy of getting the issues of pipeline vandalism being curtailed and improving oil production, which is evidence in the statistical availability to everyone. But when you say winning the war, I think it's rather right to say the battle has been won. Though I'm not a military personnel, but I know that today is the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. So when you say the war has been won against pipeline vandalism, that means everything has been brought totally down. But I think there's a significant reduction in issues relating to vandalism, significant reduction in issues relating to incidences, and that is evidence in the number of reports we see on screen, and also evidence in how much thick smoke we see in the skies of our community. And I think that there's a major watershed in the pipeline surveillance related issues, because it seems that of late there's a large-scale expansion in community inclusivity in how these issues are being managed. And I think that inclusivity of our communities have resulted in what we now have as a significant reduction in the incidences of pipeline vandalism. But I think that the battle has been won, but we have to sustain it so that it could become a war won.
In sustaining it, what strategy do you think should be maybe accelerated or emboldened? Is it the CSR or is it more of the armed part of the war?
The armed part of the war has proven not to be effective. That is evidence in all the other paradigm approach that has been engaged. It's because the armed engagement did not work. That was why amnesty came. It's because the armed engagement did not work. That is why the ideology of a surveillance company integrating the communities to become part and parcel of the surveillance process. I think the armed strategy will not work because it did not work before and cannot work now. What I think can work is a deliberate convergence, a deliberate strategy or innovative policy direction by the companies shouldered with the responsibility of protecting pipelines within the Niger Delta, and specifically, like you were trying to mention today, PINEL. PINEL is strategic, specifically on the Trans-Niger pipeline. What I think they should do to sustain this is to expand the community engagement structure that they have. That's one. Then two, The seemingly CRS, that's a community corporate social responsibility introduction that has become a little bit very, very significant, unlike what was before, should be capitalized on and then reach out more, because the whole truth is that the issues leading to pipeline vandalism or any other action within the Niger Delta that has negatively impacted the environment, oil production, and the revenue of the Republic has been as a consequence of the failure of proper integration of the people, and then an organized mistrust from us as the people with those who are major players in the oil sector. I think if this mistrust has been successfully broken by integrating members of the communities to become part and parcel of the protection process, it will be more effective and it will work more efficiently than the use of arms.
Yeah, so I hear you say localizing contracts, and I wonder, do the states have the skills, the personnel to handle it if the contracts are localized?
It is currently being localized because the companies that are providing surveillance services and pipeline protection are local companies. They are mostly pan-Niger Delta companies. We are aware of it being pan-Niger Delta. But when you say localizing to the level of discussing whether each state should be responsible for its pipeline protection and surveillance, for now I would think that it will be a disservice to us, because in secondary school mathematics they will tell you that you should find the bearing of point A to B. I think of late, the NNPC and her partners, the private sector partners, have been able to develop corporate innovative strategy to make a departure from what has been into what we're getting today. If that is the case, I think it will be right, appropriate for us to allow the bearing that has just been found to run 5-10 years. Then we see if our ultimate target, which is to increase production, guarantee peaceful communities, reduce environmental degradation, recover our environment through cleanups and other variables, and get more of our youths into active and positive engagement. If that is taking roots now, I don't think discussing the issue of segmentizing it into states will be of any need at this point. And most importantly, pipeline surveillance is a very unique kind of thing that requires the deployment of some form of expertise, technology, and tools. And what if you reduce it to state level now, and those persons that you're trying to bring on board have not acquired the requisite technology and skills and experience of how to go about this? The companies that are seemingly succeeding now, that there's this increase in outputs, did not start in January last year, but it's because they've been able to find their bearing by innovative strategies that is now working. I don't think it's proper for us to say we want to dismiss how it's working. Let's allow the bearing to be properly found, and then we'll move from there.
All right, so with this now, I mean, I think I hear a bit of optimism from you. Do you think we can meet the target of about 2 million barrels per day production this year, 2025?
I think we will exceed that. Some of us are long-time dramatic personnel within the Niger Delta advocacy engagement spectrum. And what we have seen in the last 6 months, across board, especially within the Trans-Niger Delta pipeline, is a significant level of cooperation. And once you have the people's cooperation, you have zero level of incidences, and then meeting the target of 2.06 million barrels per day. If I'm right, that is where I saw the budget being pegged. It's very visible, it's realistic, and it can even be exceeded. The only thing I will add is that there should be more of a conscious, deliberate effort so that when there are incidences within the pipeline that are not necessarily as a consequence of vandalism, it should be responded to adequately and timely. Because sometimes we think that pipeline related issues and accidents are only product of vandalism. Tear and wear also happen. Natural incidences, push and pull by water and all these things still occur. So if the companies, the NNPC and our partners who are involved in all these things are more up to date in their engagement, because definitely when there's an issue there will be reduction in the pressure from their own ICT technology, though we are not experts in that, but we know that there are such availability. They would know it, they should also respond. But I think from the community level, the degree of awareness, consequent expansion of inclusivity is very significant, and Nigeria can get above that targets.
So another issue is the issue of pollution of water and land. What's the status now, and how do you think it can be effectively handled? Should the IOCs, international oil companies, handle it, or do you think perhaps the federal government should also look the way of localizing contracts around that?
The roots of advocacy in the Niger Delta was embedded in the environmental degradation that affected our aquatic life, that seemingly brought the activities of our environment to a standstill. Anything that will be necessary that can improve the environment, help us recover the environment, what in the layman language will environmental recovery, what in the layman language will be referred to as clean up of areas. I think as it stands now, that our local companies are demonstrating capacity in developing SIS, structurally implementable strategies in the surveillance contract. I think the issues of the clean up, reclaiming the environment, should also be localized. We should get pan-Niger Delta companies, local companies like they've done in the surveillance job, to also come into this clean up so that we can also have a conversation with them, and then they will understand some of these things that is seemingly very difficult for the IOCs to understand. Personally, I think that if we bring in local companies to the clean up and the environmental recovery, it will be more efficient.
All right, so with all of this sentiment around and work going on, what do you see in the nearest future? Maybe by the end of this year, do we meet our target? 5 years, 10 years? What do you see for the Niger Delta?
I see two things. Number one, I see expansion of opportunities for Niger Delta people in terms of youth engagement, in terms of more availability of revenue for states to administer and develop critical infrastructures that are necessary for urbanization and development, to ease healthcare service delivery, to ease transportation, to ease every other thing that is needed to guarantee a better life for the Niger Delta people. Then on the other hand, I also see the benefit to the Nigerian states, because if the Niger Delta communities become more peaceful, becomes more engaging, the revenue to the Nigerian states becomes higher, and it means that the issues of more borrowing and all those things will be reduced. But as the Niger Delta, I wish that I could see a paradigm shift in the over-concentration of oil-related conversation about the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta, as it is today, has other capacities. Evidence in it is the media successes by Niger Deltans, banking successes by Niger Deltans. It means that the government of the Federal Republic should have conversation with Niger Delta people outside oil and gas. That is to say, if we can get back our aquatic life to function, if we can get back our boat building companies to function, if we can get back situations where we could have ICT hub because we are very creative in the Niger Delta. We're the most unique people in this country. We have excess of manpower capacity. If there is a paradigm shift a little from just oil and gas conversation in the Niger Delta in the next 5-10 years, I see a change that will guarantee not just infrastructure development, but peace and tranquility in the Niger Delta region. And very importantly also, with this increase in production and all the other variables that are becoming stable, I wish to see that in the next 5-10 years, the Niger Delta waterways will become one of the decent waterways in at least in Africa, because as it stands today, when you move from Ibro down to Ondo, all the waterways seemingly are so messed up. In other climates, in Liverpool and Netherlands and other places where waterways transportation and waterways life exist, they don't live in the kind of shanties, dirty and shambles we live in. I see a future where with this stability, this successful collaboration to help Niger Delta stabilize will guarantee that these waterways will be cleaned up, and then we will have a more decent life for ourselves and for our children and for the generation unborn.
All right, thank you so much, Secretary General of Niger Delta Intelligentsia Team, Mr. Nse Udo, for your views this morning.
Thank you.
Well, away from oil and gas is feeding. Yesterday, the Minister of Agriculture did have a meeting, but I'm afraid we may not be able to take that. But I can just tell you that he's assuring Nigerians that the federal government is committed to increasing food production to address food shortage and food inflation in the country. The minister outlined some of the recent developments in the sector. I mean, you saw that in our report end of the year. Yesterday he said this in Abuja. The Minister of Agriculture is our friend, long distance friend, I must add, because he has refused to come on our program, but he's still our friend because we must eat in Nigeria. Well, closely related to that, we're going to be talking about food business with Engineer Pascal Okeke. He's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Restaurants Booming Firm, to tell us how all that's happening in the country is affecting that firm. Let's continue this conversation on other platforms and channels, television, discussing restaurant business and what has been happening. Economic headwinds we've seen, are we recovering? Is that sector or that industry also recovering? I was speaking to Engineer Pascal Okeke. Engineer Okeke, good morning. And Engineer, talking about food business.
Good morning. Good morning.
So tell us how much impact the headwinds we've seen in the country has affected restaurant business in the country.
Okay. First of all, I would want to, give credit first of all to the sector, because the food business sector in Nigeria has, remained one of the sectors that, irrespective of the economic headwinds, has continued to thrive, and it's so because it's food. And not just basically because it is food. It is also because it's a place of relaxation for a lot of individuals after the hustles of the day and all of that. And so I would also want to give credit to the operators, the players of the sector, because they've also remained resilient in the industry, irrespective of the challenges that they are facing. But as for challenges, I must tell you, there are lots of challenges that these men and women are facing in the sector, and then they are trying to do their best to pull through from them. And for me, I would say that the biggest challenge the organized food business sector is facing in Nigeria is challenge on costs of operation, but most particularly on the cost of food. Because you can agree with me too on the current rise in ingredients materials. And so if you're running a restaurant where you have a list of or endless list of menu items, and the price hike they are currently suffering is as high as it is always very difficult to, stay in business. So the current increase in raw materials for this sector has, gone ahead to minimize the contribution margin. So you can imagine a typical restaurant, operating or running at up to 40% to 45% food cost alone. You know the implication of that. I know there is no ideal industry standard, but then we at the Restaurant Booming Firm, we always encourage that restaurateurs should run at least between 30 and 35, and that is still dependent on the kind of restaurant that you operate. But then anytime the percentage on food alone increases beyond 35, 40, some are doing way more. We've had overhaul on a restaurant that was doing up to 62% just on food. And then when you take into account the overhead, which is also on the rise, and then take into account the labor also, before you talk about the efforts they are putting in to, promote their businesses, you understand that the cost is over laboring for a lot of brands. Yeah, the business is a game of number, and a lot of bigger restaurants might not experience these problems as it is because of the number. And but then for the smaller restaurateurs, which of course we have them more in numbers scattered all over Nigeria. So this is a capital problem, and it's a problem that I wouldn't know, but maybe along the line I may also be able to give some recommendations that we persist or insist that they try to form such recommendations or take into account such recommendations to be able to manage the cost at bed.
Perhaps you should go ahead, just go ahead and share those suggestions.
Okay, so for example, we recommend proper internal structuring is one of the key areas of curtailing this cost. Because I would always insist that there is no point, trying to improve the foot traffic into the business when the internal structures or systems are not in place. Because when you have the internal structures and systems in place, it helps you to tame the cost to a reasonable level. And there are some costs, that are fixed, like the labor. If you have a number of persons on your team, for example, the cost is a little bit fixed to compare to food and to compare to overheads. So when the structure internally is well put in place, it helps you to keep the cost at 10. So that anytime you now put in some efforts to increase the foot traffic, you'll be able to see the effects in the business, and you can tap into leveraging on the game of number that this business is thriving on. Again, I also see the fact that there are no local communities for respirators across the country as a very big challenge. I know there are such organizations on a national level, but what about the state level? What about the local community level? Can we have these respirators, clustered together? And of course, there is a stronger power and unity in efforts that are pulled in together, especially in sourcing some of their local raw materials. So if we have such clusters in local communities, at local government levels, at state levels, and then you're talking about the national level, it will definitely assist, especially the small players in the industry, or in the sector rather, to be able to access some of their raw materials at a better price rate, to be able to manage their costs, and also see something, no matter how small it is, in their contribution margin.
So do you think
again, of course, we are also making efforts in that regard as a restaurant booming firm, trying to cluster such community. We've been able to build over 3,000 of that, and we are supporting the communities, as much as we can. But then more needs to be done across the country.
So do you think that perhaps that would also eliminate the third-party thing? So the restaurant, for instance, can have a direct interaction or transaction with the farmers, and that might reduce the cost of the food crops?
Of course, my company recently did analysis on the impact of purchasing directly from vendors and purchasing directly from the farmers. And we did this analysis with an ingredient that is as little as the egg supply. And so when we did the analysis, you notice that they lose a lot of money from buying from vendors. I'm not trying to, distort anybody's business, but it's always better off that ingredients are sourced directly from the source. And this is one thing that these local communities that I'm suggesting and trying to champion with the restaurant to be fair.
All right, Engineer Pascal.
It will help to cut down on cost.
All right, Engineer Pascal, thank you for that. Obviously, removing the middleman or middlemen would help. I guess we'll have to continue this conversation on another day. Engineer Pascal Okeke is founder and chief executive officer of Restaurants Booming Firm. Thank you for sharing those tips with us this morning.
Thank you again. Thank you very much.
So I'll get off your way now, hand you back to the Sunrise Daily Studio. But Ladi Williams will be here at 1 p.m. as well as Aniti Edet. They'll be taking you around the world of business in 55 minutes. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Enjoy the rest of your day.